All right, so let's talk about the, the fundamental nature of having a practice
hmm
and scheduling your practice and um, things like that. Basically, how do you get the time in and also know what to do to get where you want to be with seeing in this case?
Sure. I think once you've decided to do this, like anything, like if you decide to do a business or something, it's like you have to have a schedule that where you're going to find the time and what are you going to sacrifice, which is a big dirty word, right? So it's because you're going to have to pull the time from somewhere unless you just have ample free time that you have an acquisition to anything else, right? So so I think first, it's we know that it's incorrect thinking to think that you could possibly do this without a practice. You can't just watch the course and think about it and throw a few things together and make it work, right? You need to practice it like anything else. So I tend to get people to think of the practice, first of all, just a timeline of a day. Like I'm going to guess that we're already past the point of what do I want? Why do I want it? We have that down. So this is just like, okay, now what training protocol do I implement, right, to get that or move closer to that?
And at
So,
this point, there's a whole host of techniques.
oh, sure. I mean, and it's really easy to become overwhelmed, right? If you think you're going to do every technique every day, you're fooling yourself. There aren't enough hours in the day to do that. Even if you could stay awake 24/7, there's
Right.
no way.
I think it's also one of those things where do you think that it's necessary to, I mean, I guess that's the why do you want it part where it's like you're, passionate about it to a certain degree or you're, uh, those like the business people will always say like you need to be obsessed with your thing that you're.
Sure. I mean, if you're just creating something that's just a new hobby or whatever, obviously you don't need to be obsessed with that, right? I mean,
Right.
everybody, when they start a new hobby, they probably get that way. And then when you get into more detail and smaller nuances of that thing, you can either like just stay at that level where you've achieved, or you can put more time and effort into it and try to get better at it to move farther and produce what you want. I think that's true of anything, right? So it is true of this as well. Like anything else, there's no difference.
The results will be proportionate to.
The amount of time and energy and proper training that you put into it.
Right.
So it's always a balance, I think, of that. So just to go back to the brass tacks, right? It's like, I start off with, again, saying, okay, for me to achieve this, I need to have enough rest so that I'm awake and aware enough to do the processes. So I start with that because we have to sleep anyway. I'm just going to make it more of a priority now.
Yeah, I remember you were saying that. I noticed you talking about that recently, just saying like, when you don't feel like you have the adequate degree of focus because you need more, you need to, sleep or whatever.
Yeah,
You're
you're
not
tired.
like going into do your practice usually when that's the case, right?
Right.
Because it's like you already know that your level of because you're tired, your level of focus is not going to be adequate to actually making progress in your progress. So it's always like a balance between like giving yourself enough rest to have enough focus to do it and, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
not just like uh pushing yourself to the point of
No.
being.
No, because after a while you have a
Diminishing returns.
yeah, diminishing ROI, right? Return on investment. So, if that becomes disproportionate, you're only going to be beating yourself up for no reason, really, or for very tiny gains, and that's not worth it. So, you want to maximize the efficiency of your practice too, right? So, that's part of the balance too. It's not just about how many things can I get in or how long can I do this thing. What's the efficiency? Like efficiency for one person may be like, I can focus intently on something for 2 weeks, and then it starts to diminish. The return starts to diminish. I'm either fatigued with it, or somehow I'm bored with the technique or whatever, and I need a little recuperation from that, right? So there's sleep time or rest time for even the techniques, right? We don't just continually do them. We have to switch them up in order to. It's the way that we're wired, right? We engage in multiple things around a core issue, and that's the way we keep our interest high. And it's sort of that juggling and balancing technique that causes the energy to be produced for it, right? The excitement, the energy, the adventure of it is like, it's not the frenetic just jumping from one thing to another and just being all over the boards with it, right? So it's balancing those two aspects out. So it's good to think of a practice much like those cycles of rest and an activity, right?
So when you're deciding like what practice to utilize at a given time, do you think like, what practice am I actually excited about working with right now, or trying or experimenting with, or seeing if this helps me move the needle in my ability to see, or dreaming, or whatever it is? I mean,
yeah. So I think you have a goal, and then if you're, here's the thing: if you're starting on your own, or just sort of making it up as you go along, then you're gonna, your time's not going to be spent as efficiently as it probably could be if somebody said, do this first, do this second, do this third, or at least find some way to kind of work these things in for this amount of time, and at least you'll move into this state. So I'll tell you, for me, what are the ways that I, how I set it up and how I adjust it along the way, let's say. And again, it's always being tweaked depending on your amount of experience and the results that you get from something. Some things are going to be really easy for you. Some things are going to be way more difficult than you expected. So, and it doesn't always mean that just pounding away at those things that are more difficult is going to produce the result you want, right? It means it's, again, balancing. Maybe the reason it's so difficult is because you don't have a really good grip on the understanding of what it is that you're trying to do. And so coming at it from a different angle might make a difference, rather than just like bullheadedly, smashing through it day in, day out, right? So, and those are things to think about. So I just start with the basic, like, line out a piece of paper with, days of the week. And let's just say, as an example, you work Monday through Friday, and you have the weekends off, and you have a family. So, what time do you get up how much sleep do you need? So I put that in. That's the first thing, because it's a constant. It's like, doesn't mean you're always going to get that amount, right? Somebody's sick or whatever is going on, you might need more or less or whatever. But let's just use it as a constant first. So let's say on average, people need 7 hours. So, okay, so I know what time I have to leave for work every day. So if I want to get, line out what you have already. That's always a good place to see where you are, right? What time do I get up? Time do I have to leave for work to get on time and not be rushed, and whatever the normal is for you. And through the course of the day, what are my routines and what do I do? And you could go so far, and I've done this, you could go so far as to map out, every 5 minutes on a piece of paper through your day, and just every 5 minutes you have a little alarm that goes off on your phone or your watch or whatever, and you mark down what you're doing at that moment, and that's it, but just go through your regular day. Don't idealize what, or don't project what you think you could do. Just do, write down what you actually have right now, and see if there are any glaring gaps in time there that you could, utilize for practice. So, so that's what I do first. Then I look at that and I go, okay, here are my open times as it stands. What can I do in those times that will give me some results? And that's where I start. So then I look, okay, now that I have my times, what do I do? Because there's all these things that I could be doing. So I usually break it down into basically 3 categories, right? General energetic work for yourself, which means self-contemplation, meditation practice, things that will give you, a good foundation in knowing yourself. That's important, right? Because we need to know ourselves deeply in order to know what kind of reaction we can expect when things occur and what our proclivities are in order to produce a certain effect. So that's the first step that I would break down. Then I would pick a territory that I'm going to work on. Let's say it's seeing. So, and I would think about I'm going to spend, let's just break it into even thirds. Third is the first part that I said. Second, third is going to be understanding as much as you can in theory what you're trying to achieve and the general concepts around it. Do you I know you may believe what I'm saying, but do you understand that everything is energy and that things are moving and there is no stationary anything really. So, and getting whatever information from anywhere, and it may not be from an energetic point of view, right? Because they're just going to repeat the same stuff with little different takes on it here and there, depending on the tradition. But they sort of all agree that that's the case. So, can you garner any information from an outside source, right? Like, so let's say from science, can you get it from that? If you're a math whiz, maybe you get it mathematically, right? So that you come at it from that way. Maybe you do it from a physics standpoint, not in the mathematical way, but, just understanding the, when I think of physics or quantum physics, it's like the energy of things and how maybe more extensive would be like how the mind works to produce that. And the same idea, or influence it in some way, right? The observer effect and so on. So I'll spend a third of the time on theory about what it is that I'm approaching and trying to do. And then a third of the time is specific practice toward that goal. So starting with the very first exercise or whatever that is, so gazing or relaxation or whatever it is, right? So, maybe starting with the breathing would be the first thing I might attempt because, especially breathing, fourfold breath or some technique like that helps me to get a better handle that breathing isn't just breathing, how important it is, what kind of effect I'm going to have. So I'm keeping my journal, right? I need time to do that as well, or the verbal journal, if you will, or any of that, right? But you're marking it down, so it serves 2 purposes. It gives you a record of what you've done. It gives you a recorded record of successes and failures, because it's good to have both to see if you're tracking in the right direction or not, right? Am I going up? Am I going down? Am I just staying flat? And so, because that'll give me an indicator of when I need to switch it up, all right? Switch up the techniques or the practice or augment it in some way. If I've hit my goal, and let's say I can, be aware of myself or understand myself better for 5 minutes at a time, like if that's an initial goal, then I've done that after, let's say 30 days. You're able to sit for 5 minutes and really just without judgment, observe your own thoughts. Well, that's excellent, because you can write that down and you can see where it's like, well, maybe the first I could only do it for 30 seconds and I got so antsy or so uncomfortable that I had to stop. And so, but you see over time as you stick with it, the increments of success go up. And so when maybe after a month you get 5 minutes of just being constant, well, that's a huge success because most people don't do that. So then but let's say you do it for 3 weeks and you see that from your journal, you see that it's the success rate is starting to go down. Maybe you're getting more antsy, you're falling asleep, or any number of things that could come up. You're too distracted. Even you got other things going on with work or family or whatever, and it's taking your attention away. You're being distracted in some way. okay, so I'm going to switch it up at that point. You know, I've determined that that's not just a fluke, but it's starting to really track in a way down. So that diminishing return comes up, and so I switch it up to bring more excitement back in. That's the joyful effort part, right? So it's like, oh, I like this. I want to be engaged, but I'm literally falling asleep while I do it, no matter how much I'm trying to tell myself it's important. So I'll switch it up at that point.
That's interesting, because I think, for me at least, it puts joyful effort into a different context, because I'm always thinking, when you say that, of, oh, like, I need to muster a certain degree of positive expectancy and joy when I do this, instead of thinking of it like, you know, that's more of like a force thing again.
Yeah.
But you're saying, if you're not feeling that joyful effort or some excitement around the practice, then do a different one. It's not don't do anything. It just means change what you're doing to something that you do have a certain degree of joyful effort for.
Yeah, and I think part of joyful effort too is always anticipating that something's going to happen that you're not expecting. You know, there's nothing more exciting to me than, you know, you're doing a practice that you've done for a long time and something completely unexpected happens. And now, you know, you could interpret it as either good or bad. And I don't mean things like being really distracted or whatever it is, but I mean, you know, unusual things that people talk about in these circles, right? So you may, I don't know. I mean, the range is gigantic, right? You may hear something that you just can't pinpoint as what kind of sound is that? Or, you know, where did that come from? You know, like you're hearing music, but then when you look around your house, there's nothing on, there's nothing, you know, playing. Nobody else has wandered in or out of your house to turn on a stereo or do whatever, right? It's just, you're here, literally, like if you really focus on it, you're hearing music in the distance. What is that? You know, that's an odd occurrence that we would think of and say like, wow, that's something I would write down, because it is sort of in the category of phenomena at that point, right? So because we've done our due diligence to track down any normal source of that at that point, right after we do it, right? I mean, some people will even, to the point of, get up during the practice right then and there and search around the house to verify. You know, it's like, I would do that. I mean, I don't, not anymore, but in the beginning, I was so, and still am, so trying to eliminate any normal, let's say mundane
causes or reasons for phenomena.
For that to happen, right? Because we can, you know, we're biased. We want the stuff to happen. So that's the observer effect, right? We're using it to our advantage, but it can work against us if every little thing that happens we're taking as a sign or an omen or a, you know, it's like, no, don't, you know, be just as adamant about not fooling yourself.
Well, I think that's where the difficulty comes in with even learning to see energy, is kind of like, you know, at what point are you saying like, oh, this is the glimmers of seeing something, and at what point is it just like something, you know, I have something in my eye, I've been staring too long, it's just that's just something that happens with my eyes when I gaze
if I gaze too long, or right. So it's like you would see if it comes up at other times. You know, I'm looking for not outside verification, I'm looking for verification where, you know, usually when phenomena, one of the things that I've noticed over time, phenomena comes up, it's not random, but it does seem to have that sort of parameter, you know, in one way. Like you could get the same phenomena from many different techniques, glimmers of it, you know, here and there. And so, you know, I think for me, when it's actually something, first of all, it's something that you're not able to get rid of in a you know, physical way. You know, it's like something that like I'm like, I'll use your example. If I gaze past 10 minutes, you know, I start getting flashes of color here and there, or things that I'm not really sure if they're even flashes, right? They might just be little, you know, what we would call sparks, little light, colored lights here and there, right? Okay, So it's like, do you ever get that like 2 minutes within? If it's always at 10 minutes when that starts to happen, can you be observant and see if that's coming up any earlier than that time? Because for me, that would negate the idea that it's that 10-minute barrier, that 10 minutes is all I can really focus on. And then I start to lose my concentration, and maybe I'm just, these flashes or something physiological within my eye or the, optic nerve that are just, it's a way for your body to tell you there's fatigue happening.
Right.
I don't know. So it's like, for me, it's like, can I get that? Does it happen? When I first started getting that, it was like, I was well trained to say, like, just ignore it, really. Like, let it go. If it's something, it'll come back.
So even when you started to get glimmers of seeing, you didn't like...
At first it was like, I was like, oh, like everybody else, like, oh my God, it's happening, and I'd run in and I'd say, oh, I got these little things. And he'd be like, it's just sparks. And then of course he had to explain what sparks was, because I didn't know. And so, and then it was like, oh, okay. And then it was sort of that overarching lesson of ignore phenomena. If it's phenomena that, people don't want to ignore it, because first of all, it's exciting. Second of all, they think they're going to never see it again or experience it again. And third of all, there's a fear factor that, it's something important that you're ignoring. No, anything that's in the realm of other that you would ignore, it won't allow you to ignore it if it's something important for you to know. So you can be at ease to just let it go. If it happens, you acknowledge it and you let it go. I'm not denying it. I'm just acknowledging it and letting it go, because it doesn't have anything to do with my practice. It doesn't have anything to do with enhancing the practice that I'm doing right now. It's an outcropping from what I'm doing. So by stopping what you're doing or shifting your focus, you're negating the practice that brought it on to begin with. Right? Mm-hmm. If hard work, following a certain procedure produced a certain effect for you, but the effect was so enticing that you stop following the procedure, the effect's going to run out too, right? So it's the same thing with this. It's probably even more with this. So, so you acknowledge it. Oh, okay, I see those. And it's like, and then I just let them go. I don't put my attention on them anymore. I don't focus on them. And so I go back to my practice and finish up my practice. And I make a note of it in my book when I get done. Then, if it's consistent or it grows, then that's something to track, right? Because we're seeing changes in it. And all those little nuances of that, the parameters of it, what phenomena, how explicit is it, where is it, colors, all of that stuff. So, so it's like, whatever that is, I want to check it out to make sure, first of all, A, that it's not something mundane. Two, is it, can it be instigated? Like in my case, after I was, just sort of like acknowledging it and letting it go. But then every now and then at work or someplace else, they would show up without me, trying to induce anything. I obviously wasn't in practice with it, but the phenomena cropped up anyway. And I was like, oh, that's curious, that phenomena seems to be popping in without me doing the practice specifically. So what does that mean? So then you would engage those questions a little bit more. Does that mean that, you were in the same state of mind as you were when you were in the practice at that moment? And so that was brought up so that you could see it, most likely. Is it happening independently? Perhaps, but most likely it is that you slipped into that state of mind that you were in when you were in your practice, and it made the perception of that, visible to you. Because it's all, for our thought process, it's always there. It's just that we're not entrained to it in order to perceive it, whether it's audibly or visually or whatever, right? So that's sort of the same idea with, like, if you think of Like there are certain places in the world where certain traditions, at least I know this happens with all of them, but like the only one that I can really say is there are a number of places in this country as well as in others where Christians will gather and they pray at certain times, feast days and whatever, and they have physical phenomena that comes out that is objective and observable by everyone in the area. So, that's sort of like that mass mind changing a localized area, like flower petals falling from the sky, the smell of roses, things like that, even visionary things, really. So, so it's like there are those phenomena that happen like that. I feel like, everybody's sort of in training to the same state, and kind of those things are always happening, but it's like we're not resonating at a level that we can observe it independently for ourselves. That's all. So where was I in the practice? So it's like, you see how this stuff can just craze and wander out into all directions. So I do my practice and I take some notes. And if I feel like it's starting to have a diminishing return, then I'm switching it up, and it'll make me excited. Oh, okay, well, I got this far on that. I'll come back to that in 30 days or whatever and see how I can boost it up again. Or maybe this other practice for a little bit of time will sort of recharge those batteries or give me a different perspective about that. And then when I engage it again, it'll go up. And that's usually the case.
Right.
That's usually the case. It's funny how that all dovetails together, but it does work like that.
Oftentimes you've said that you would take a specific goal, like seeing or whatever, and work on it for like 3 months.
Yeah, 90 days usually.
90 days.
Or a little bit. Yeah, or a little bit more.
So when we're changing up what we're doing, it's not that we're changing the goal over that period of time that we've said we're going to work on this ability or try to produce this result. It's more like we're using different techniques to keep moving toward the same thing,
right?
But just finding ways to mix it up so that we can stay actively engaged.
Yeah, and I often think of it in the terms of a journey, right? So like, let's say the terms of a journey over a myriad of terrains, right? So what works for me in the mountainous region, good stiff hiking boots and warm clothes and whatever, those things are not going to help me when I get to a lake I have to cross. So, and on and on, right? So whatever it is, I mean, I'm going to need to switch up my personal attire and techniques in order to achieve getting through another stage of that. But I'm still headed toward my goal of where I want to, what I want to reach, right?
And much like a physical journey, it's like if you're not spending time moving every day, then you're not
whatever
gonna, you're not going
to whatever degree.
Yeah, you're not going to end up making any. You're going to still be in the same landscape that you started out in.
Right. And it doesn't mean, again, that you don't, that every day has to be exactly the same, right? There are days that I don't have I practice, but let's see, not as many anymore, where I don't get a decent amount of practice in every day. But there were plenty of times in my life where, I always did something every day, but it wasn't always a lot. It's like if I got 10 minutes in some days, it was a decent amount and it was enough, where I could really focus on it and then, do the other things that I really felt were pressing and I needed to do. Like just as a specific example, like if somebody's really working hard and they're really exhausted and they, for whatever reason, they haven't gotten enough sleep in the last few days, and they have this little break of time at the end of the day before they go to bed, they're going to practice their stuff, or they know they're just like, God, they can barely keep their eyes open, right? So at that point, I will, what would probably be a more practical thing for me would be to just read a small amount of some theory that I'm trying to understand deeper or whatever like that. And if I'm too afraid that sitting down and reading the book, I'm going to fall asleep, I stand up and do it. Because it's very short. I'm not talking about chapters in a book, right? Especially of a dense theory type book or whatever, right? I'm going to just grab this, maybe a paragraph of what it is, or one page of what it is, and I'm going to stand under a light and I'm going to read it and try to really contemplate what it's saying to me. And then after I do that, with the question in my mind, how does that relate to the practice that I'm doing right now to achieve my goal? And then I put the book down and I go to bed, because you're just basically asking yourself that open-ended question, which is going toward the subconscious, and it has a burning desire to answer those things, right? So, and what better place than going to sleep to let it engage that and work it out? Now, if you're smart, after that, if you have any dreams or anything, you're going to write all those down, because your answer is going to be in the symbolic representation of what those dreams were. And so you're really getting a lot done, but you're just, but you're not using force to get it done, right? That would not be the time to sit down with all your books and open them all up and try to do some complex analysis or to go in and try to focus on a very specific thing, and you're like, you're doing the head bob because you're just exhausted, right? So let's go with the flow of your day or your time right now and utilize that in the best way possible. That's how it's done. At least that's how it's done efficiently, I think. You can try the other way. I mean, I did the other way, and I usually fell on my nose, but it was it was a good learning experience for me, and it made me try to be more efficient, which made me more effective. So in the end, that's what we're all trying to achieve.
So do you have any other thoughts about that, about scheduling and getting in your time for practice and all those types of things?
Sure. I mean, see where you have time, from your original schedule, see if there's any, and then plot in, practices for the original schedule that you started out with. Don't change anything right off, except for maybe, getting the right amount of sleep every night, right? So you go to bed at, that time. You need to wake up at this time in order to get off to work at the right time or whatever. And the weekend the same, right? So I try to keep it pretty consistent. So at that point, I'm looking at, like any other places in that schedule, that I have a gap of time. Do I have a job where I can get a 2 minutes of break in between every hour or something like that? And of course, then maybe it's only twice a day that you get that, a 10-minute break or something. Am I going to just take the 10-minute break, or can I engage in some very light practice that will help me achieve that momentum that I'm building over time? Because it's all about that, right? It's about doing something so frequently and with enough energy and in knowing the right direction that what goal you're trying to achieve, then you're building some kind of momentum there. And so like I said, I mean, I never did a day without practice, but sometimes it was just small amounts, right? So let's say you get 2 10-minute breaks in the course of your workday. So maybe I just need 10 minutes to shoot the crap with the guys that are there, right? And, but I'll take another couple minutes and do a breathing, do the fourfold breathing for 2 minutes straight. If you can get someplace, or, I mean, you can do, once you get a handle on it, right? You don't have to close your eyes or whatever. I mean, you can just literally count to 4 and, 4, 4, 4, 4, right? And do that breathing for 2 minutes. See if it changes your state. Does it give you more energy? Does it not give you more energy? Does it take away energy? So it's like all of those things are things to note. So I put in all these little things. They don't seem like much. When you say 2 minutes, people tend to ignore it. But when you add it up, I mean, if you did that, 10, 12 times a day, that ends up being, I mean, it ends up being a lot, right? It ends up being like, I mean, what did we figure out? It's like between 90 and 120 hours a year. That's not really a lot to sneeze at, you know. It's like how many people actually spend that amount of time on even a meditation practice, right? So that's a lot. That's no small feat. And so, you know, you add that up over time, plus the other things that you're doing, right? So I'm just working with my original schedule first. Then once I've done that for 2-3 weeks, you know, you might find that you have more time that opens up. You know, you might find that you're longing to do more practice, which is usually the case. You're longing to do more, and so you're willing to sacrifice other things to get more time to do those practices, right? So, okay, you know, it's like everybody else is watching the sitcom, but you're going to go to your room and do a half-hour meditation or whatever it is. So, because you're getting some benefits, so you're trying to you're in the game now, so you're trying to add more to the pot, right? And put your effort in the right places and achieve more. So that's, and then it's just an adjustment from there, finding out, you know, which territories have the most legs for you. You know, is it more of your meditative practice, contemplative practice? You know, is analysis really where you're starting to, you know, shine, or you're really getting drawn into and you end up spending hours there instead of just, you know, the half an hour that you dedicated to it? You know, the theory, or, you know, the techniques, and you're just like a technique maven, you know, you go in there and you're just like banging them out one after the other, really just got them down, you know, and those are all the things that everybody has to vary a little bit. Just don't try to do everything at once, you know, sort of pick a territory and go with that. As long as I have my 3 areas covered, then I'm good. You know, I feel like I'm accomplishing something, and any of them can adjust, and I do adjust them. I adjust them every season. One will take more precedent than the other two, depending on the season of the year or whatever. For me, that's what I've come up with as the best scheduling sort of practice for me. So, and that's it. But, you know, we don't really have to be concerned with that until we get past the point of just setting up any schedule and doing something. Even if it's in the beginning, you just, you know, you're going to get a half an hour in on Saturday and Sunday and not going to mess with the other stuff other than getting enough sleep every night. Right? So, yeah. So that's what I would say with that. It's all about how to achieve your goals, right? I mean, no matter what I can think of, I can't think of anything that I wouldn't need a schedule for if I really wanted to achieve something beyond just what you have, you know? So, yeah, I need to find places to put more time in to what it is that I'm trying to do.
And with the imbibing technique, where you're doing these small amounts, whether it's 10 minutes or 2 minutes or 1 minute,
right,
or whatever, what would you say the fundamental nature of effective imbibing is? Like, when I'm looking at,
why does it work so well?
No, not why does it work so well. Like, how do I determine what techniques will function as an imbibing technique versus like this only is effective when I sit down for 30 or 60 minutes to do this.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
sure. I mean, to some degree, it depends on experience, right? But from the beginning, I would say things that take minimal amount of effort, you know, like breathing. You have to breathe anyway. So I'm just putting it in a different configuration than I normally would to see if it changes my state, right? And, you know, I could say relaxation takes longer, but once you get used to it, I mean, you're trying to make it quicker and quicker, right? So like even being able to go through relaxation in 1 minute, I mean, how far can you go, right? Like, can you do, you know, I don't know, let's say there's 10 areas to relax, starting from the head, working to the toes. You know, can you do 6 seconds on each to get it done in a minute? Forget about the quality of it, and just can you do it? You know, can you give yourself the command to do that, right? Because if the subconscious keeps getting the command or the demand for profound relaxation in 1 minute, it's going to try to do that. It's going to try to help you out to be able to do that, whether it's finding more times to do it, remembering to do it more times than you normally would, and the effect of it getting closer and closer to achieving that goal. The more times that you do that, it's pushing you to do that. It's sort of like everybody thought the 4-minute mile was impossible until one guy did it. And then once everybody knew that it was possible, everybody else was able to start cracking it, right? So, you know, it's that the momentum and knowing that a person could do it gave everybody else the idea that they could possibly do it. And then they were trying to achieve it, and they were. And so it's sort of the same thing with things like relaxation, right? So I don't think that there's, unless it's a very complicated technique to set up, then I would leave those for other times. But if it's something where all you need is yourself and the correct idea of the practice, then things like that, awareness, to some degree awareness, open focus, and relaxation, breathing, even visual things, like it doesn't, breaking personal history, you know, by doing something like signing your name with your left hand or whatever it would be, right? Those don't take any effort, really. I mean, no time to do, really. And so they're things that can be done well in the amount of time that you have. And they do acquire, you know, they do get strength over time. So other visual techniques, you know, visualization techniques that are really easy to implement, especially if you have trouble visualizing. So, you know, have a bunch of cards that are just numbered cards, and then just, you know, take out all the complicated ones. So it's like, you know, do you have a 2 of hearts? Okay, everybody knows a heart. Everybody knows a diamond. Everybody's, you know, so, you know, can I visualize that number in red with a heart shape? You know, can I visualize the card the way it is with the outline and all of that without letting it move? You know, it doesn't take long. It takes, most people can't hold it for more than a couple seconds anyway without it shifting or changing. So, you know, those increments are good for that, because it's like, and if somebody happens to walk by or walk in, I mean, it's always nice to have privacy, but if somebody walks in and they're just going to say, oh, you play cards? Yep. That's why I'm not using, you know, weird things, because then it's going to invite more questions, and it's going to, you know, use common things. You know, it's like so much can get done just using those things and deflecting any kind of questions that might come up. It's like, oh, I'm learning how to play cards. And it's like, whatever, you know, nobody's going to really go into it much farther than that.
Are you practicing magic?
Yeah, no, not really. No. It's like,
Pick a card.
yeah, pick a card. Oh, I really suck at this. So, yeah, so I mean, there's not a whole lot that I can think of that wouldn't be applicable. You just have to sort of stretch yourself a little bit to see, you know, how could I implement, if there's a thing that I like, how can I implement that in an imbibing way? Is there a way to do that? Or is it just too complex? You know, if you're going to do all kinds of candles, and mirrors, and, you know, then no, you know, obviously that's not something you're going to be able to imbibe, you know, but, you know, if you were doing some technique that had multiple parts to it, it wouldn't be a bad idea. If you wanted to help yourself with that technique, it might be writing out the parts of it. You know, like first step, you know, comfortable position, make sure my back is straight, relax the body in this way, you know, go through this first step, go through the second step, go through the third step, then, so that you really have it clear in your mind. And even writing it out a lot of times will bring up other questions. It's borderline analysis, really. But the idea is if I can write it down clearly, then it's going to be clear in my mind of what I'm doing and the process that I'm going through to do that. So those are all imbibing techniques. Those are all things that people can do, for a minute or 2 minutes in the course of a day. And, as you do it more and more frequently, it just becomes more cemented in your mind about how to do those things. There's no questions at that point. You're really just going through the technique if it's that scenario that I'm offering. I can't think of too many other things that wouldn't be applicable of things that we do. And even with the singing, you could do gazing for a minute. Off the cuff, no relaxation, just do it. See how it works, right? There's that bit of adventure in it. Like, God, I hate that coworker. Let me see if I can see them. Yeah, it's like and you just do it for a minute just to see what will happen, right? It's like, are you staring at me? It's like, you're kind of like looking off into the distance, and they're in your field of view, but just to see what will happen, right? So you're engaging the practices in all kinds of ways that will, keep you in the game all the time, right? Nobody has to think about this when we apply it to other things. The best one, my favorite one always is like a new love in your life. You can't get them out of your head. It's like you're at work. You could be working with dangerous equipment and you're still thinking about whoever. It's like it consumes us, in a way. It's like you don't have to, it's like every other thought is about them in some aspect or some way. And, and in a way we are obsessed with them in the beginning. I mean, that's what sort of makes it really awesome, right? And so, we're not talking about how to sustain that, right? We're just talking about those initial times, and that can last for several months, right? At least, where, it's like it's constantly on your mind about, what do they like? What do they don't like? What's this? What's that? Oh, what about this? What if I could do this with, whatever. It goes on and on, right? So it's the same thing with this. So, if I have a question about it, I always refer back to those things that we do it naturally anyway. How many people have you heard that they find a new band or new music that they love, right? And it's like everything they talk about, everything that they engage with, you'll love this song. Let me play this one for you, until you're finding like, you're avoiding them because all they want to do is talk about this band or this song or whatever it is. And so people have a natural tendency to do that, or they learn a new hobby or game or something like that. They've gone bowling for the first time in their life, and it's like they want to just, they're looking up stuff about bowling online. They're, what's this, what's that? It just, we become captured by these things that just, they're so new and engaging to us, right? So, and it's no different with this. We just need to, figure out how, we can engage it, as opposed to going on the internet and looking up bowling, or whatever. But how, there are plenty of practices that lend themselves to very short increments of time through the day, and it keeps your hand in through the day. It keeps you charged up about it. So yeah, that's what I would do. And then if people have questions specifically about their own schedule or how to get around certain things or what to do to augment it, or questions of that nature, then that's why we have the live question and answer every other week, right? Because it's important that, sometimes, people have really unique situations, right? And they just can't work their head around how would I do it in this situation. So they just need an outside sort of look at it, an opinion. And that's sort of where we come in, and the rest of the people in the community come in too, right? So, because they've got some good experience there. Yeah, I'm always amazed at how many people come up with great suggestions for people when they have questions like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that idea of falling in love with not the practice, maybe, but the result that you want.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about it on those in that way is kind of like when you're so excited and anticipating having that experience or being with that person,
Right.
it's not like you have to work to think about it or
Right.
to do something that's gonna, bring you closer to that or
Right.
whatever. Yeah,
Right.
it's just like,
And it's amazing how that idea kind of goes through like so many, almost everything that we can think of, right? It's like
yeah. It,
it's
it's like that's
amazing,
the
really, because I mean, if I just use my crazy bowling example, right? It's like, the guy's not just concerned about, uh, what bowling glove to buy. He's only bowled once, and he's already thinking about like, can I get a custom made ball? Can I do this? Can I do, how's my grip? What's this?
hmm,
He's not thinking about. I mean, he's going after that stuff, but what is he really going after? He's going after the strike.
hmm,
He wants to experience that, or maybe he even did by accident the first time, right? Just dumb luck, got a strike, and he was so charged up about it, it was like instant love,
yeah,
right? And so he wants to get back to doing that again,
right,
and then maybe 3 in a game, and then maybe, and then way out in the future, he's looking at a perfect game, strike every damn bowl, it's like every throw down the lane, he's looking for that perfect game. And that's what charges him and keeps him engaged, and he visualizes it and sees it and imagines doing it, and
right,
and that pushes him to, what other thing can I use to help me get to that place? Is it the glove? Is it the magic glove? Is it the perfect glove? Is it the perfect bowling ball? And it might be little bits of all of those things, but really, in the end, what is it? It's his engagement to the end result.
it's falling in love with the game.
The whole thing, right,
Yeah.
right. But there's those peak moments, and of the strike or whatever, or winning, and all of those things that give that huge dopamine rush that make you go like, oh my God, I got to do that again, or even better. What can I do to be better?
Right.
And so it's that kind of engagement that really grabs people and holds on to them, and it becomes part of you at that point, right? You're obsessed with it, really, in the best sense of the word, right? So so I think that's kind of how I think about initially building a practice,
Right.
right? It's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
about that, and
I think
it's not more complex, but you have to start somewhere,
right.
right? Because it's like people want to know how to integrate it into their lives. Well, I mean, you got to start somewhere.
I mean, it's kind of like, but at the in what we're talking about here with the scheduling is like, it's almost like when the initial love of a new love kind of starts to level out and become the new norm for you, then it's like, how do you intentionally do things that you create a ritual out of putting more time and attention and energy into that thing to keep making it great and make it even better and all that, right? Otherwise it waxes and then it wanes, right?
Right.
So yeah. But I like I think it's just one of those things with spirituality that and there's no doubt, I mean, energy work, all this stuff is spirituality. So, I mean, and I think it's part of it's one of those legacies that we're working through, is all of the moralistic things that come with our idea of spirituality that, can make it almost like that's the norm for us as Westerners. It's like, you think about people going to church as a kid, right? And it's like being bored in church as a little kid, or having to, moralistically determine whether you're being good or bad based on the rules that are being told to you and all those kinds of things. And so, when it comes to this, even though it's out, it's a different approach. I think it still is kind of, in some ways, tainted by that. Like, am I doing enough? Am I doing it in the right way? Am I doing it for good reasons? Am I all that stuff? And so I think there's that hesitancy to start, because then there's like the guilt if you don't follow through, or whereas like with business or a relationship or whatever, or even your health, it's not as moralistic. It's just like, yeah, I want to change my diet because I want to experiment with feeling a little better, or I want to get a new job because that would make me really happy, or whatever. So I think when it comes to this, just reminding, at least for me, reminding myself, like, you're doing it because you're in love with it, and you're excited about the possibility of what it could be like, or how it could enhance your experience of the world, and always reminding myself of that, so that it doesn't become drudgery, so it doesn't become something that I feel like I have to do or should be doing, or any of those things. I mean, I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, but I think that it's I don't know.
Well, I think somebody else put it in a good, concise way. They said you have to be in love with something enough to show up. That's a great, succinct thing. It's like, if you love something, you'll show up. You'll be on time. You'll want to be there. And you're going to do whatever it takes to get to that place, or you're going to have a damn good reason why that didn't happen. You're literally going to have to be held down someplace else. It's like, when you love something, you're going to make it happen. And but I just like that idea, because it's true. It's like, it's like, I don't know. I mean, next to my practice, it's what I've done with my life, among other things, but it's always been the core of everything. But you know what? It's like, I adore my wife, and it's like, I can't think of anything that I wouldn't do to show up for her anytime. So it's on the same level. It's like, if you think about the things that you do, what else sort of garners that respect and that love, to be able to show up. You love it enough to show up and be there, really present there for, any time. And I have the same effect. I've had the same thought process and feeling about it as that. So, and I think that's, but also, you're going to have you get the experiences from that, and that helps to boost you up in those times that are more difficult, right? So that's what it is. Those experiences that you've had or you've engaged with are like, they're important, for a lot of reasons. And I'm not saying dismiss the phenomena that happens. It's like you're acknowledging it, right? You're not just saying it's not there. You're acknowledging it, and then you're letting it go, knowing that it'll come back if it's important, and it won't bother you if it's not. That's all it is. But it's on the way to the goal that you're trying to achieve, right? So, and there's lots of it. So, yeah. So I think, that's the best that I can think of for that, and how to engage your practice, in a good way.
Yeah. Awesome. Interesting. Started out with like something so structured and mercurial as the schedule, and ended up on the other side of. But I mean, it's always my concern when, we start to talk about like scheduling and getting enough time in and all that stuff, that it's like, it sounds so boring, but understanding the emotional part that actually that drives the thing that seems mundane and all that, it makes it, it's a lot more like I can get behind that.
Right.
Makes sense.
Right.
I'm in the game. So
Cool.
all right, thanks,
All
man.
right. You're welcome.